2 Kings 24 and 25, and 2 Chronicles 36. Well, let's review the very end of the Judean monarchy. We ended before with Josiah. He's the last good king. Jehoahaz actually is deposed by an Egyptian pharaoh, and he's taken down to Egypt. And then Jehoiakim, actually his name is Eliakim, he is installed by the Egyptian pharaoh Necho, changes his name to Jehoiakim. He will last 11 years, at which point in 605, this is the first of 3 deportations leading up to the final destruction of Jerusalem. In 605, Jehoiakim is taken off to Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar. This would be also the same time that Daniel, the prophet, will be taken. And we have then the promise that 70 years will pass. Some people date the 70 years from this period, which would be 605 down to 535. That would work as well. He will die in 598, and Jehoiachin will come into reign. He surrenders in 597, 1 year, really 3 months into his kingship. He is going to surrender to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar will come back down. He will be taken then to Babylon as well, along with 10,000 princes. It seems that Ezekiel will be one of the princes at this point taken off to Babylon. So Daniel goes at this point, and Ezekiel goes at this point. Again, this is 605. This will be 597, basically. And it says specifically that only the poor remained in Jerusalem at this time. Well, Zedekiah, his name is Mattaniah originally. It's changed to Zedekiah. He's installed by King Nebuchadnezzar. There is a feeling, I think, on the ground, and here's where Zedekiah makes a mistake. He listens to some false prophets who give the idea that maybe this catastrophe of 597, as bad as it is only temporary, and that someday Israel will come back to the land. Well, Zedekiah makes that huge mistake of listening to these false prophets. He rebels against Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar comes back one more time. This is in 588. And here we have that 1.5 year siege then that leads to the 586 complete destruction both of the temple and of the city of Jerusalem. In fact, let me read from 2 Chronicles 36, the end of the story. And again, this to me is how Genesis 12, the story that really began in Genesis 12, comes to the end. So it's important to understand these words. But they mocked the messengers of God, despised his words, and scoffed at the prophets, until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people, till there was no remedy. Therefore God brought against them the king of the Chaldeans, who killed their young men, and the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and had no compassion on young man or virgin, on the aged or the weak. He gave them into his hand. And all the articles from the house of God, great and small, the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king and of his leaders, all these he took to Babylon. Then they burned the house of God, broke down the wall of Jerusalem, burned all its palaces with fire, and destroyed all its precious possessions. And those who escaped from the sword he carried away to Babylon, where they became servants to him and his sons until the rule of the kingdom of Persia. And then he says, to fulfill the word of the Lord by Jeremiah, to fulfill 70 years. So that is officially the end of the period of the Judean monarchy, and 586 is the date that we put on that. And again, some people will date the 70 years. Really, you can do it from any of these, and this would be, of course, a 516 rebuilding of the temple, if that's where we get the 70 years. It is interesting in the list in 2 Kings of all the plunder that is taken off by Nebuchadnezzar. It lists pots and pans and bowls and basins. It never mentions the Ark of the Covenant. That gives us reason to believe that the Ark was no longer in the possession of Israel at this point, because Nebuchadnezzar makes no mention of it. As we said before, Gedaliah is a man who's installed as a regent governor of this land at this point. He will be killed in an assassination later, just several months into his reign. Jeremiah, meanwhile, stays in Jerusalem area. He tells the captives, remember that letter he sends to them, to dwell in their city, bring peace to the cities of Babylon, and even serve that king. It is important, I think, as we then leave this period, to realize that in Israel itself, organized cultural village life will continue. Now, we don't have a lot of information about this time because, again, Daniel and Ezekiel are going to be writing from Babylon. But this will be a period where we start getting vocabulary that's important for our understanding of the New Testament. Words like synagogue, even the idea of a Jew. Actually, Israelites are people that we would identify here. A Jew is someone who, through intermarriage, becomes a resident of Judea post 586. And then also the idea of Judaism. At this point, before the captivity, we would call these Torah followers or Yahwists. But history will record from here on out, as Israel becomes creative with understanding how to worship Yahweh without a temple, this will become the period or the beginning of the idea of Judaism in specific terms.